Hello, and welcome back to my journey from normal to Norway. So buckle in. I'm thinking this is going to be a longer one. I am finally, after mentioning it several times for a while now, going to be talking about the when of Norway coming into my life, which I'm sure you already know by the title, because after I film this, I'm going to title it blah, blah, blah. So the when of Norway came into my life. I will say before I really get into it that I've been, I guess, procrastinating filming this video for a little while now. I think I've put a lot of pressure and expectations on myself of things that I want to say in this video, things that I don't want to say in this video, ways that I want to say things, ways I don't want to say things. And I think I've maybe, without even trying to or meaning to, built it up in my mind a little bit as being like extra important or potentially extra meaningful or impactful, and just all these things that are just kind of putting pressure on me and on this. And so I don't like any of that. And as things like that often do in my life, it's held me back from actually doing this, from filming this video, from sharing this information with you. And so I am cutting that off, and I'm just going for it. And so I've decided to just do this thing, and whatever I say, and what I forget to say, I forget to say, and I don't know, maybe I'll comment later to add it, I don't know, but I'm just gonna let myself be on this one, and I'm going to just trust that what needs to be said and what people need to hear and what you need to hear will come out of my mouth. So that's my disclaimer. I'm gonna, try to have some grace with myself on this one, and I hope you will too. And there's gonna be a lot of information here. I don't know how it's all gonna come out, but I really hope that some of it will be helpful to some of you out there. So yeah, let's get into it. I had a very, very rough, I don't know, few years there. As I've mentioned my age before, I'm 32, getting close to 33. And so this kind of started, I don't know, to bubble up some years ago, maybe a handful of years ago or so. I worked at a place here in LA that was part of my life for over a decade. Ended up being like 12 and a half years. And over time, the importance and position of that place in my life grew and grew. And it got to a point where for many years I described it as being my home and my family here in LA. So a place and people that I really cared for, that I loved, that meant a lot in my life, that informed my life in many ways. And I loved it there for a long time. And it grew to become also a place where I worked. So in addition to being my main community and all these other things, it was also my job. And that was a great situation for a little while there. Worked for people who I loved and who were a really great fit for me to work for. Had an awesome little work family. And then we got some new leadership there. New guy in charge, who brought on another guy as like a second in command kind of thing. And they just started making some pretty terrible decisions, some pretty hurtful decisions. And people started leaving. And so some of them were pushed out. Some left on their own. Some ended up being fired eventually. It was just a really bad situation. It went really south, in a really horrible, sad way. And in the midst of that, I decided to leave on my own. But I was kind of like taking a stance, for myself and for the people who worked around me, to say this is not okay. And how we're being treated is not okay. And I refuse to be treated this way and to stand for this. And so I left that job and that place without having another job lined up, which was risky, to say the least. But it was something that I believe at the time I needed to do, and it's not a decision that I regret. So I left March of 2017. And so also to give even more context to this time in my life, leading up to that, there were, I kind of have explained them as like explosions. I feel like there were areas of my life that just kept exploding one after the other, and senses of home that were just being ripped away from me one after the other, just completely out of my control, and all kind of around the same time. And so, for example, I've had a few very close best friends, and I've always been the type of person who, I don't have like a lot of close friends, I wouldn't say, like a whole crew, I have a lot of acquaintances and a lot of people that I, enjoy being around and all of that, but very few really, really deep, important friendships, and I kind of focus in on those few, and really invest there. And so I'd had some of those awesome women in my life who'd been part of my life, and who I'd spent a lot of time with for some years, and they started to move away, which I was and still am happy for them. But, that was hard for me. One moved a few hours away within the state, and then a couple ended up moving to the other side of the country, to their home states. And those are all great things for all of them and their families. But losing them was really difficult for me, and came at a difficult time. So that was another factor of it. Sorry. Let's see. Another factor was family. In the fall of 2016, October 2016, one of the explosions in my life was a family one. That was a big, bad one. Really, really hard. And came out of nowhere. And again, I think it was just something that made all of this worse, was that it was all happening at the same time. And so, normally when something like, if your job goes awry, you might go home to your hometown to recoup, Sorry, got something in my throat. But because this kind of family explosion had happened, I didn't really have that option. That was one, like, as I said, my senses of home were all ripped away from me. So I didn't really know where to turn. I didn't know what direction was up. It was just a really hard time in my life. And also kind of leading up to that, I'd started to have this feeling of not knowing what was next, and not even being able to like guess. And so, I moved out to LA, studied theater in college, wanted to be an actor since the fourth grade. I don't know. I can't remember if I've mentioned that here or not, but that was the impetus for me coming out to LA. Was wanting to pursue acting, which I never have fully committed to as a result of my lack of self-confidence and my self-hatred and all of that, which I know I've talked about here before, and just not believing that I'm, worthy of my dreams coming true and happening. So, but anyway, that's why I was here. And that was the only career thing I could imagine myself happy doing. It was like no other job or career could lead to a happy life or a content life or a fulfilling life for me. And so, I got to the point a few years ago now where, I was getting around 30 and where I just had no idea what was next or what I should do or what I could do. And then I started to have really awful feelings about myself about that, of like, how did I get to this point? I'm, 30 years old, have a good education, have some work experience, have, people in my life who love me and support me, have things that I'm really passionate about. And yet I can't even imagine or think up a job or a career that would feel fulfilling and meaningful and purposeful. I just felt it was so terrible. I felt purposeless. I felt useless. I was like, why am I even on this earth? What do I have to offer? And I felt like I had nothing to offer. And that sucked to be in that place of really truly feeling like I had nothing to offer. Ooh, tearing up over that one. So this is the place that I was in. All of this crap was happening, explosions in my life all over the place, senses of home being ripped away from me. And I take this stand in March of 2017, and I leave this place that had become my home and my family, as I described here in LA, with no next step. And again, not a decision I regret, but something that definitely had some impact in my life. I, after that point, did not work for 10 months. I was so lost, and so hopeless. And what I didn't really know at the time, or I maybe had some awareness of it, but really not a full awareness at all. It's only in looking back that I can really see what I was going through was PTSD for sure, from those life explosions, and situational depression. And I want to be clear about saying the situational part because I don't have and have never had clinical depression, and so I don't want to claim to know what that's like or the effects of that. And so, I don't want to pretend to know something that I don't know or pretend to have an experience I don't have. So I don't know the difficulty of that. I just know my personal situation, and what was, told to me by my therapist and feels accurate is that it was situational depression, meaning that when the situations that caused it were to be changed or eliminated, that the depression would lessen or go away. And so I was in this place where I knew it was really hard to get out of bed. Most days things felt a lot more overwhelming than they normally would, and just bigger and more difficult to get started, more impossible to complete. I had things that I wanted to get done, such as cleaning out my apartment. I'd lived here for 6 7 years at that point, and so had accumulated a lot of stuff and felt just suffocated under my stuff, and so I wanted to get rid of it. And that was a task that took me a long, long time to get through, and something that on the days that I wouldn't do anything towards it, I would just feel awful about myself. So it was kind of this like self-fulfilling prophecy over and over again of like, you know, you're worthless. You can't get stuff done. You're never going to do this. And so then a day would pass where I didn't do it, and it'd be like, there, you proved yourself right. You can't get things done. You can't do things. And again, that's a sucky feeling, to feel over and over and over again. And so just feeling terrible about myself, not contributing anything to the world around me, to people around me, and not really just, yeah, it was pretty terrible. And obviously, you know, when you don't work for that long, money gets tight. And I'll also say that I had not really ever been fully financially independent. And that's hard to admit, and that I don't like either. But, you know, being in LA, pursuing acting, having the kinds of jobs I had, you know, low paying jobs and whatnot, it just led to that circumstance. But I would need some help, different amounts of help at different times in my life, but I feel like it had gotten better and better and better. But then all this stuff happened and it got worse. Went in the opposite direction. And so I was needing more significant financial help. And that was an extra difficult situation given the circumstance of the family explosion I've referenced vaguely, intentionally vaguely. And I didn't want to ask for more than what was absolutely necessary. And, you know, I think I've told one person this, but I'll go ahead and say it here. When it got the most difficult, this moment of the circumstance is really what stands out to me. There was one time in the midst of that where I was running out of toilet paper, and I did not know where the next roll was going to come from, how I was going to be able to afford my next bit of toilet paper. And I'd never been in a circumstance like that in my life before. That's the point I got to. I was kind of wondering, you know, where in my life I could possibly steal toilet paper from. That's not a proud place to be in, but it's a place I got to. There was also 1 month where I lost like 10 or 11 pounds because it got to the point where I was like, okay, I cannot buy any more food. Literally, I need to go through what is already in my fridge or my freezer or my shelf. And some of it, it was really not like meals, you know, it was snacking or whatnot. And it was not a lot of food each day, but also I kind of didn't notice because I was not awake and up and about for very long each day. I was, you know, in that depression place and sleeping and whatnot. And so, yeah, that's just to touch on the financial difficulty of the place that I got to. And, you know, things did start to turn around eventually. I mean, it felt like I was in quicksand there for a while. And I would also think of it as being like in a pit that I'd fallen down into, and I was just needing to like claw my way out of there. And I knew that I needed to, and um, I think even at my worst, I believed that I would get out of it. I didn't know how or when or how quickly. Um, but I remember now when I was at my worst, I would tell people, um, I know that someday I will look back on this time, and I will say, oh, that thing was right around the corner and I just didn't know it. That thing was coming, or I was being prepared for that thing, and I just didn't know. So I always, I think, had this belief that I would get through it or get out of it. Um, and and I knew also that like the best way to combat these things, this depression and this PTSD, this feeling of purposelessness and hopelessness, was to take action. I knew that in my brain, but I think my heart and my body, was also resisting, and it just took me a while to get on board with that, to really take action. But slowly but surely I started to, and going into 2018, I knew, I had a sense that I need to do something. I need to get out of this. I just need something. And over that time I had applied to a few jobs, certainly not as many as I could have, but applied to some, and things wouldn't come out of it. Wouldn't get any calls or anything. Um, and I had this one horrible conversation, in January of 2018, um, that I'd never wanted to have again. Um, yeah, I think I'll be vague about that one as well. But it was with a couple of people who were really important to me, and we ended up crying in a public restaurant. Things were said to me that were very surprising to me, um, that I hadn't heard before and didn't really know where they were coming from. It was a really difficult conversation, um, that I think came out of the place in life that I'd gotten to and that I'd been in for a little while. Um, and I did not want to be in that place anymore. So I knew I just needed to do something. So, in January 2018, I applied, um, to a job, um, that was pretty, I'll say, humbling for me. Um, one A job that I did not expect to, ever have in my life. Um, but I applied and I got that job and did some training and worked there for a few months, and it was certainly not nearly enough money for me to live off of, but it was something. It was getting me going in the right direction. And the thing is as humbling as that job was for me, it did exactly what I needed it to do. It was the right step for me at that time. I met people at that job that I really, really enjoyed. A lot of the people that I worked with were very different from myself, and I really enjoyed getting to know them. And also, it just kind of, slowly but surely it got me out of my apartment more consistently. That was one thing I didn't mention earlier. When all the different senses of home were being ripped away from me, the one that wasn't was my apartment. This apartment I'm sitting in right now, and so I clung to it. Again, that's something I couldn't see or articulate till later. But the reason I spent so much time here, home alone, over the course of those 10 months, was because this was my one home that wasn't being ripped away from me, that I had some control over, and I hung on and would not let go, and spent a lot of time here alone. So anyway, this job got me out of my apartment pretty consistently, got me interacting with humans again more consistently. And it was just exactly what I needed at that time. So I'm really grateful for it, grateful that it happened. And it was, turns out that it was a stepping stone to the next thing. There was a particular skill that I was learning and doing in this job that I was enjoying, and told my friend about it last May around my birthday, so almost a year ago. And I was talking to her about it, and she said, "Oh, well, if you're enjoying doing that, we have a few openings in this department that is similar to that. Would you be interested?" And so I gave her my resume, and she turned it in, and I went and I interviewed, and ended up getting that job, which would not have happened if this other one hadn't come first and paved the way. And this job that I've been in now since June of last year is again exactly the step that I need to be on at this time. And after being in a place for over 2 years of just feeling like I'm not in the right spot, but I have no idea what's next. I just don't know. It's felt really, really good to be in a place that feels like this is what I'm meant to be doing right now. This is where I'm meant to be. This is the step that I'm on right now in life, and this is the right one for me right now. So that's been just a huge relief after the horrible place that I'd been in for so long. So that is kind of the timeline of things that were going on. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to say before getting into the Norway portion. I feel like that's the gist of it. This thing is almost 30 minutes at this point. Anyway, so that was my life. That was what was going on for a few years there. And so the timing of, I'll talk more about the how Norway came into my life next time. So don't worry, I will get to that. But the when is November of 2016. So if you'll remember, people were moving, explosions were happening in life. October of 2016 was the family one, was a big one. I was already so lost and lacking in confidence and feeling no purpose and no worth and all of that. Just, going down, 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 down. And in November of 2016, bam, Norway shows up. Out of nowhere. Out of the silly circumstances, which I'm excited to talk about next time. And so it really, I don't want to say saved me. That sounds extreme. But it really got me through a sucky time. During those 10 months when I didn't work, it was there for me, and I was doing reading and researching and just really soaking up anything and everything Norway. And in January of 2017 is when I started learning the language on this, free app on my phone. And in those 10 awful months of not working, and when I got to just the worst of the situational depression and the PTSD, on the darkest days, when I getting emotional talking about it, when I just didn't even want to get out of bed, when I had no motivation to do anything, the one thing that every single day I felt a motivation to do was to open up this app, this silly app on my phone, and spend a few minutes learning a random language for a country that had not been on my radar at all for most of my life. And I just couldn't help but think, that's gotta mean something. I don't know what, but it's gotta mean something. Norway really got me through the hardest, darkest period of my life. And I'm so grateful for that and excited about that. And that's where I don't know yet where it leads. I mean, I'm so psyched to take this trip next month that I've been dreaming of now for 2.5 years. And I don't know, maybe that'll be it. Maybe that'll quench the thirst. Maybe I'll have this one trip and it'll be great and I'll be satisfied after that. Or maybe it'll lead to more than that, and maybe even, I don't know, I'm meant to move there and live there. I don't know, but I'm open to that possibility. I'm open to all the possibilities at this point. I feel like that's one of the things that I've learned through all of this. I used to have a really, as I said earlier, acting was the only career I could imagine leading to happiness. That's one area of my life, but in all areas of my life, I feel like I used to have a really narrow idea of what would lead to a happy and a purposeful and a fulfilling life. You know, very, very narrow. And I feel like that has just broadened. That I am so much more open to the various possibilities that could come about in life. That feels like a good place to leave it for now. A hopeful, upbeat, exciting place. So I've been pretty honest and vulnerable here. Tried to not share too much or say things that would hurt people, so I hope that I've been successful in that. But I also want to try to be as honest as I can for those of you who need to hear it, who need someone or something to relate to. Maybe you're in that place now that I was in. I mean, what an amazing thing to think of. I mean, in a year and a half, that's not that long. I've gone from not knowing how I was going to be able to buy my next roll of toilet paper to being not only financially independent for the first time in my life, but able to pay for my own trip to Norway. That's amazing. That's such a journey. So I hope that that gives you hope if you're in a position where you need hope right now, if you relate to some of that dark, awful, yucky stuff that I described earlier. You might not be ready to hear it, but I'll say it anyway. You will get out of this time. It will pass. Just, you know, put one foot in front of the other, claw your way out of that hole. There's good stuff outside of it. Sorry. So yeah, that's the when Norway came into my life. Clearly, obviously, at a time that I needed it. And next time, I will talk about the how. And we're getting closer and closer to the time of my trip. Really looking forward to that. This has been super long. If you made it this far, thank you and congratulations. I will see you again soon. Until then, ha det.